so hoarse in the morning. All right, so we are in chapter 2. We're in chapter 2. And as a reminder, please make sure you're reading chapters 1, 2, and 7 for the week. Yesterday, we talked about chapter 1, and today we're going to talk about chapter 2. And chapter 2 is going to piggyback off of what we started in chapter 1. We'll elaborate a little bit more on basic skills that companies are looking for you to have, as well as identify, we'll dig a little deeper into soft skills and what that means. And then we'll round out talking about workplace ethics and what digital citizenship means and how that's going to be relevant in your career. So yesterday, not sure what PowerPoint slides 438 means, but anyway, make sure that you guys are doing the participation assignment, just as a recap, particularly because if you don't do the assignment, like I noticed a few of you guys were here yesterday, but then you didn't do the assignment by 12:30, and your attendance and your participation points don't count. So you're missing points if you're not doing that assignment by 12:30. Now, your attendance doesn't count towards your grade, so I don't want you guys to freak out about that. But the participation points do count towards your grade. And both of those things you get when you do that assignment, which is normally just a quick question. So it should be fairly easy for you guys to do. So please, please, please make sure you're doing that by 12:30. All right, because it closes at 12:30 every single day, because that's the time that your class technically ends. Now, for all of your other assignments, just as a recap, you can do those at any time prior to Sunday at 11:59, but the participation assignment must be done every day by 12:30. Do we understand? I just want to make sure we understand that, because I just don't want you guys missing points because you didn't understand something I said. Okay, thank you for the thumbs up, guys. All right, grading is done. I typically grade on a daily basis or every other day if it's an assignment. I'll hold the discussion question later through the week because you do need to respond to one person. So I don't grade that until I see the response. Please remember that you get 60% of your grade for your discussion on your initial post, and the other 40% comes from you responding to someone else. So I know I just don't want you to get confused. If you see the 60 on Sunday, it's because you didn't respond to someone else. So please make sure that you take note of that. All right. So we started talking about our career plan. We're going to get more into that and wrap up that by the end of this week. All right, so let's talk about some basic skills. So in chapter 2, we all know, before even reading it, that our fundamental skills typically includes what? Reading, writing, speaking, listening skills, mathematical skills, technology skills. Those are things, and technology skills are kind of new, right? Because I think most of us can agree that technology skills was not a fundamental skill in years past, but it definitely is now. When it comes to hard skills, though, what are those? Our hard skills tend to be skills that are related to your specific industry. So those skills are going to be skills that are related to your specific industry. When it comes to soft skills, though, soft skills are going to be things that you bring to the table, whether you brought them because you already had them or you brought them because you acquired them over time. I'll always speak for myself in my time in the military. How many veterans do I have? Give me a thumbs up. And I think most veterans will agree that, am I the only veteran in the building? Can't be. Maybe so, who knows? There's certain things that the military teaches you, which is why people in the military, and if you have a family member, anybody have a family member that was in the military or that are currently in the military. Um, Time is of okay, there we go. So what you'll notice about us is we're very time sensitive. Is that not the case? One of the reasons why we're so time sensitive, or we've been trained to be so time sensitive, is because 1 minute, 1 second can really get someone in trouble. You understand what I mean by that? So it's important that you listen well. It's important that you take direction well. It's important that you're always on time, right? Those things are ingrained in you in the military. So even after you leave the military, you stick to that, and I've always been a stickler for time anyway, so that's why you'll see me start right at 9:59 and try to end at 10:59. That's just at the latest, and then that's just because of a skill set that was ingrained in me in the military. But some things that are personal to me is I'm really, really big on I would say, I don't know if this is but I'm the type of person, if I read a book, I want to read it from start to finish. I don't know what that is. I want to know everything. Even if I only need chapter 2, I still want to read the whole thing so I can understand chapter 2. Does that make sense? Like that's a skill set that I bring to the table. I need a comprehensive understanding of something. Okay, I see a thumbs up with that. That's just me. I hate it. And even though I'm doing it to you guys, I hate when someone, well, actually, I'm not. Maybe a little bit when we get into chapter week 3. But I just give me the whole chapter. Don't just tell me to read pages 2 through 3 and read pages and skip down to page 17 through 19. Like that drives me nuts personally. But I understand that it may not all be relevant, but I like to read everything cover to cover. But some other skills that you will need, working effectively in an institution are thinking skills, people skills, and some of your personal qualities. Now, that all has to do with your ability to, um, uh, you know, um, think critically. So when we talk about thinking skills, I know that somebody may say, what do you mean? We all think, but they mean thinking critically, right? Being able to problem solve, right? Which is very, very important. You deal with people, you got to problem solve. Is that not the case? So, that is going to be a critical skill that people are going to want you to have. When it comes to ethics, now this is interesting because workplace ethics all depends on where you work. Every company has a different set of ethics. What is going to be ethical and critical in the field, the veterinary assisting field, is going to be very different from what's critical in the electrical or in the welding field, right? Does anybody want to share? I know this is, you guys most haven't had your coffee. This is a quiet bunch. My last bunch talked so much. I don't know if the memo was, nobody asked questions. My last bunch talked so much, but of a workplace ethic in your field. Does anybody know of one that's really, really critical? And when we talk about ethics, and you can just jump off speaker if you want, but when we talk about ethics, what are we talking about? We're talking about those moral principles and belief that typically directs your behavior, but in workplace ethics, it has to do with directing the behavior of the job. So there's certain things that you cannot do, right? And I'll just use the military as an example. Even though I've worked in banking, nonprofit, government, all of the life, they all come with different workplace ethics. But I know in the military, one thing that we did, we used to have to carry a code of conduct card in our upper left um, shirt pocket, and it talked about all the things that we subscribe to, which again, why do they do that? Because they want every soldier in the army, at least, to subscribe by a certain group of ethics, right? Because they want everybody to be on the same page at all times. I think that's one of the positives of the military is they want everyone to be dressed, talking the same, speaking the same. Nobody, if you bump into a soldier if in Afghanistan versus bumping into one in San Francisco, you're going to get the same message. You know, they were really good about that. They used to be when I was in anyway. So, and those code of conducts is very, very critical. You may find that definitely in the medical field. Any VA people in the building, give me a thumbs up. You know, your code of conducts and your code of ethics are going to be very, very important. Like how you treat each patient, you know, it is going to be critical. Now, I would imagine in the welding, electrical, and who am I forgetting? HVAC field, there's going to be some of that as well, especially if you are dealing with customers, and especially if you are and especially if you know, are dealing with, you know, contracts. You can't be cutting corners. You got to make sure that you do things the right way, right? Especially if you're working in construction. We all know what can happen there. Now, there are things that will happen in your industries that are considered unethical, but they're not illegal. Does that make sense? And there are some things that are going to happen in your industry that are both unethical and illegal. Now, what is the difference between the two? Well, let me just tell you. Unethical will get you fired, but illegal will get you what? Put in the court system. Don't think that because you're doing something on behalf of a company, if a company asks you to do something illegal, that you can't be sued or go to jail. So you can't say, oh, my company told me to pour this in the river. No. Well, you and your company are going to jail, right? So you have to be mindful of that. So there are things that are unethical and there's things that are illegal. Here in the book, it gives the example of obviously discrimination and harassment. Those are both unethical and illegal. So that means that, number one, not only can, you know, you be ratted out if you're the company, right? Speaking of the company, you can rat out the company, but you can also sue the company because it is illegal. And so, you know, those things can, can both be criminal and civil, right? Which civil means that you can ask for monetary damages. Criminal means somebody could, worst case scenario, have to do, you know, some confinement time. So, you know, you just don't even want to go down that road, but it is important for you to know that there is a difference between the two. Any questions on that? I'm sure hopefully your instructors are talking you through those things. I'm sure that they are when it comes to what not to do and how to manage, you know, things that are unethical and illegal in your respective industries. Again, using VA as an example, you're administering medicine to animals, so you probably have a whole bunch of ethical and legal things that you have to be constrained to. Let's talk a little bit about this idea of digital citizenship, because this is something that some of you may not have considered. How many, by thumbs up, have a social media account of some kind? I know some of you had said that you have a LinkedIn, but yeah, okay, I see a lot of hands up. You probably have what y'all, I was about to say MySpace and embarrass myself. What y'all call it? Facebook? I haven't been on Facebook in 15 years. I don't know. Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. I don't even do TikTok. I have an Instagram account that I don't use. So, you know, that just goes to show I just don't have time. But you guys probably all have those things, right? Okay. So let me go ahead and tell you something. Once you get into your career, my friends, you need to be careful with those. There are companies that are very, very, very sensitive to who they hire, that they're very image sensitive, and they will go through your pages. Some of them will even do it before they hire you. I know it's so annoying, right? Especially if you get that, you know, HR person that thinks that they're a private investigator. They will go through your private pages to see who you are. Now, you may say that's fair, that's not fair, whatever, but if it's out there, if you put it in the public, it's in the public, right? So you got to know that. Why else do they do that? They don't want the bad image. If you think that's fair, give me a thumbs up. If you think that's fair, give me a thumbs up. Okay. And I use the example of this. Uh, you know, I don't know how many of you have children, but I don't know if you guys heard about that teacher that got in trouble because she had her OnlyFans page. Y'all heard of that? If you have a child, give me a thumbs up. Patience, you want to say something? Or are you just raising your hand? If you have a child, give me a thumbs up if you would have a problem with their teacher having an OnlyFans page. I'm just curious. Would you have an issue with that? Yeah, right? Listen, if you have one, don't let me know about it. And a lot of people may say, okay, why is it an issue? Well, it's a character thing, right? It's a judgment thing. Like, you may ask the question, like, maybe you need the money, honey. Sir, listen, I don't want to judge nobody. But, I don't know if I want myself or my child or anybody else stumbling upon that. And then it's going to make me question, your decision making. Right. So like that's just life. That's just reality. Right. What if your pastor had an OnlyFans page, God forbid, or something like that? You just question the person's decision making. Right. That's just reality. So what you put out there in the stratosphere can be reviewed. So we tell people, as you get into your profession, you may want to scrub some of that stuff, clean it up, or in addition to that, create a new page, right? I see a lot of professionals, they have a professional page, even on Instagram, TikTok. If you're in the welding field, talk about everything welding. Yesterday, we talked about becoming a subject matter expert. There's nothing wrong with putting the welder guy, and that's your persona. Remember, we talked about career personas, and you post everything about the welding, what's happening. Maybe you become the Central Florida welding guy, right? That's part of who you are because you're going to build your business, and post that type stuff. So if someone pulls your name up, the most recent stuff that you post, the newer stuff, is going to pull up. Some of that other stuff that you have down there talking about politics and all that kind of stuff, let's push that to the back burner, right? Because you don't want people in your personal business anyway, do you? Right? That's your personal stuff. You want them to see the professional stuff. So I'm just going to give you a fair warning that there are some HR people. I worked for a CEO that would even look on people's pages, which I thought was a little too much, but hey, I'm just telling you. So just be mindful that happens. Everything that you post on the internet has what is called a digital footprint. And that's what chapter 2 is talking about. So when they talk about when you post something, someone can find it. So everywhere you walk around on the internet and you're posting here and posting there and liking here, YouTube, Instagram, wherever, someone can find it because your digital footprint is like little fingerprints all over the place of where you've been. And not to, frighten you with that, but just be mindful, right? I try to stay out of politics. Sometimes, even myself, you're so tempted, right? You're so tempted. I've had to say something once or twice and regretted it. But just be mindful of that, because that is a thing. You don't want to get caught up. You don't want to get caught up in that way. All right. All right. So now, as I said before, you will have some, requirements to know about the internet. The reason why chapter 2 talks about cloud computing is because 9 times out of 10, your company is going to have software that you're going to use, even if it's just company software with your internet and I mean with your email or whatever, and they're going to be on the cloud. So we're on the cloud now with Microsoft Teams, right? And you may be required to at least understand the basics of cloud computing, which is just internet-based computing, where instead of you having if you've been at a company before, you ever been to one of those server rooms or one of those rooms, they have all that technologies. That is just where all the data is housed. but now companies just rent that space on, from an entity, and they have servers. Like they're still servers, but they rent that space instead of having it on site. So understanding the basics of, software applications on the cloud and how to use them may be a thing, right? It depends on how big the company that you work for, but just understand something like that. If someone's, your company is like, oh, make sure you put all your emails, on your drive and back it up to the cloud. A lot of y'all young folks, y'all know about that kind of stuff. But, some older folks, we still may know about it too. I'm not saying we don't, but, that's just language people may use. So just be mindful of that, because like I said to you before, and I'm telling you guys right now, we do 2 what we call professional meetings a year, when we bring in companies in Central Florida, and we tell them what they, we ask them rather, what's important to you. And one of the things that they say is that, yes, they want you to be a great welder, but they want you to have basic computer skills. Do y'all understand why that's important? Give me a thumbs up if you understand why basic computer skills are important, because you still have to do administration work. Unless you are just in the type field where you just clock in, do your welding, go home. Most of you, I don't think, that's going to be applicable to, especially if you're trying to make it up into management. You're going to need some basic computer skills, my friends, some basic typing skills, things of that nature. So I'm glad that you guys understand that. So that's the same thing when it comes to, software and files and understanding what that means. Again, I know for welding for sure, just because I used to be associate dean over that program before. There are software involved. I would assume electrical too, because you guys use all these high tech type systems, right? Um, Welding and electrical and HVAC too, probably. Give me a thumbs up. You guys have software, right? Y'all give me a thumbs up. I don't want to discount you, because I'm pretty sure you guys are using some type of software, even if it's like handheld devices. Yeah, I'm sure. And they're probably getting more sophisticated than back in the day when I was over those programs. Yeah, I'm sure. Exactly. I'm sure. Right. So they're not getting less sophisticated. I'm gonna tell you that right now. So those things are going to be important in your respective fields, and definitely in VA as well. Now, when they talk about intellectual property in chapter 2, what are they talking about? All they're talking about is, if you work at an institution and they have any type of intellectual property, it's just the things that they created that is licensed. You obviously will need to ensure that you keep those things private, but you'll get training on that, whatever it may be. And you obviously can't take it somewhere else and use it. So, but your companies will let you know that if any of that stuff is applicable. I want to talk a little bit about this thing called netiquette. Now, when you, I don't know how many of you guys love the text, but has anybody ever gotten a text and it's just like a bunch of what do you guys call those things? Not just emojis, but those little acronyms. And anybody ever got confused with acronyms? It can't just be me. Don't leave me hanging now. We're friends. Thank you very much. Okay. Sometimes it took me a minute. Listen, I have to Google some of that stuff. I'm like, what does this stuff even mean? Can we just use English, please? Thank you. Thank you very much. Once you get into business, you can't talk, even if you're texting your boss or a coworker, my friends, you're gonna have to just write it out. Please don't use acronyms and a whole bunch of emojis and things of that nature when you are engaging. I know a lot of you guys know this, but I still get some of it too, so I don't know if everybody knows it. And just having proper etiquette. Again, if you happen to have to engage with someone, or if you are on the internet doing your own engagement, whether personal or professional, you want to have proper etiquette, but it's called netiquette. I know it's a corny term, but that's what they call it. And it all just requires you to communicate effectively, properly, and professionally, even if you are using some type of social platform. We see it all the time, right? People get into these big arguments with strangers, or they think the person's a stranger till they find out where you live. Then you realize then you realize, uh-oh, I might be in trouble, right? So you really want to practice good etiquette and etiquette, because again, you just don't want to go down that rabbit hole. How many times have we seen people go down that rabbit hole, whether they're having these inappropriate conversations to someone's face or even online, and the next thing you know, the person's posting everything about you. Like, you don't want that drama, because if your company gets a hold of it and you work for them, y'all see what happens, right? And I know you say, okay, why are we talking about that? Because being in a career is very different from having a job. When you're working for a company, especially a well-known company, and you start to get up there, in positions, how you present yourself is going to be important. I know some people may be like, why are they all in my business? But it's going to be important. Hopefully you understand that. So there are some rules to netiquette, everything, obviously being human, which is funny, but, following standards that you would follow in everyday life. They call it, what they call it, internet courage or something like that. Like, don't get that internet courage and post things that are inappropriate that someone else can find. Know that you are in cyberspace. That means anything can be retrieved. Be respectful. Again, I'm talking to you as a career professional, not as a person. I know you know that as a person. As a career professional, just be mindful that someone's always looking and listening, and you just don't, would you want your boss to find it? Would you want your next HR person you're trying to get that new job? Do you want them to find that kind of stuff? So just be mindful of that. I have seen people lose their jobs over it. That's why I'm really, really pushing it forward. All right. Also understanding that you will have certifications in your respective fields. So that's something that you want to make sure that you are preparing for. I'm sure most of you guys will know that. A lot of your instructors, your technical instructors, will tell you about those certifications, and maybe part of your career plan. I know certifications in certain industries are definitely a big, big deal. So that is also something that you'll want to consider as you are building out your career plan. But we'll talk more about that. All right. Any questions? I always feel like I'm running through this stuff, but I always want to leave time at the end to talk to people one-on-one that may have personal questions. All right. Any questions? Any questions? All right. All right, here's your participation assignment. I want you to name, and don't be shy, don't be shy. I want you to name one quality that you feel sets you above the competition. Like I said before, you look to the left or the right, and I'm sure all these people in here are great friends of yours, but you're different. That's just life, right? It is what it is. We're different. We all bring different things to the table. I want you to tell me one quality that you feel sets you above the competition, and one quality you would improve upon. And, being able to, do improvements is good, right? That nobody's perfect. We're all work in progress. All right, you guys got it? One quality that sets you above the competition, and one that you can improve on. All right, I'm gonna give you guys a few minutes to do that. After you post this, if you don't have any questions, you're free to go. For those of you that do have questions, please stand back and we'll deal with it after we stop the recording.